In this lecture module, we'll shift our focus towards the task that will occupy us for the rest of the lecture. That is, looking at individual classes of fallacies. And we'll do this by looking at the fallacies that fall under this general category of fallacies of relevance. So we'll talk about what a fallacy of relevance is, then we'll go through and look at individual groups of fallacies that fall under this categorization. We'll talk about appeal to force, appeal to compassion, oftentimes described as appeal to pity, but it's really soliciting compassion, appeal to the people, both direct and indirect, argument against the person, fallacy of accident, straw man, red herring, and missing the point. So let's turn our attention to fallacies of relevance. In general, fallacies of relevance are categorized together, grouped under that general heading, because they're said to share a common property, namely that their premises are psychologically relevant to establishing the conclusion, but they're logically irrelevant to establishing the conclusion. Now, I think we can do better. I think we can actually understand these fallacies as falling under the categories of content distortion and strategy distortion. And we can see how the content distortion and strategy distortion will result in the minimizing of evidence or the rendering of evidence salient, revealing underlying structural features, changing the way that we understand the context of the situation, moving it from a straightforward inference or decision into a case of personal risk management or social cognition. And we'll do this by seeing that strategy distortion works by triggering various social cognition inferences so that our mind starts to solve this problem as a social cognition problem and not as an inference problem or a decision problem. And similarly, content distortion works to manipulate content, to distort our perception of the argument's evidential basis or its form by either rendering some content opaque or rendering some content salient. Let's begin going through those individual classes of fallacies that fall under this general umbrella category of fallacies of relevance. The first is appeal to force, or argumentum ad baculum. This is a fallacy we've seen already. The idea behind appeal to force is simply to associate acceptance of the conclusion, rejection of the conclusion, acceptance of a course of action, rejection of a course of action with the avoidance of some personal harm. This is the reason why logicians tend to group these together under this rubric of fallacies of relevance. The premises here are psychologically relevant. You want to avoid harm. That's psychologically relevant. But they tend to be logically irrelevant. That is, the truth of the premise doesn't bear on the truth of the conclusion. In this case, the desire to avoid harm motivates assent instead of evidential or argumentative force. That's why appeal to force is an instance of category distortion. It gets us to think about a straightforward inference or decision problem in terms of either social cognition or, in this case, avoidance of harm. It's important to emphasize here that one of the reasons why appeal to force may seem like a really good argument is precisely because it poaches upon our native inference strategies, that desire to avoid harm that we need to be able to use in order to negotiate the world and avoid risk. That is being poached upon by our appeal to force argument in the way that it reconstructs the situation so that our perception of the problem is changed from a problem of inference or decision into a problem of harm avoidance. We see a similar pattern emerge when we consider the next fallacy of relevance, appeal to compassion. And again, appeal to compassion is usually called appeal to pity because it tries to invoke pity, but it invokes pity for the purposes of trying to get that compassionate response, that desire to act on our emotion, to reach out in a compassionate way to alleviate the suffering of someone else. And so if we come home one night and we find Milquetoast the cockroach sitting on our counter and we're about to splat him with the shoe, Milquetoast, could he talk, might give us a following argument. I realize that I wipe my honey all over any food you leave out, and I gross out the dates you bring home, and I crawl in and out of your mouth while you're asleep. But I've had an unhappy life, and if you splat me with that shoe, who will take care of my 7 million children? Let's consider one more example.
Okay. Pretty good, right?
I'd say a solid B minus.
A B minus?
You were hawking your great-grandfather's crap in my classroom.
No, kids enjoy. Look, can you do me a favor? Can you look out the window for a second? You see my father? He's the guy in the green car. Okay, I want to tell you about a dream, a boy's dream, and a man's promise to that boy. He looked at me in the eye. He said, "Son, I'm going to buy you a car, but I want you to bring me $2,000 and 3 A's." Okay? I got the 2,000 and I got 2 A's. Okay? Here's the dream. Your B minus, dream gone. Kaput. Sir, just ask yourself, what would Jesus do? Yes!
No?
A minus, it's an A though.
Oh, wait, I can't see. It's an A.
So I'm good.
The nice thing about that particular clip is the way in which the category distortion is literally manifest. When Wiki says, look out this window, change your focus, change your context. Our next fallacy of relevance also turns on social cognition, and hence it also turns on category distortion. The idea behind appeal to the people, or argumentum ad populum, is that in order for us to have the benefits of cooperative living, in order for us to be truly social creatures that interact in a cohesive and cooperative fashion, there needs to be a certain amount of ideological and value similarity between us. And so we seem to have evolved a bias towards conformity in this way, such that it is difficult for us to distance ourselves from others ideologically when it's important particularly. Sometimes students will be resistant to this idea, other times students will accept it readily, but the social psychology literature is literally overflowing with experimental data offered up in support of the view that human beings have a fundamental bias towards cooperative behavior and a fundamental bias towards conformity across a wide variety of contexts. Now, the experiment that tends to emerge most often in this context is an experiment that was done in 1951 by Solomon Asch, in which subjects are asked to judge relative line length.
The Asch experiment is one of psychology's oldest and most popular pieces of research. A volunteer is told that he's taking part in a visual perception test. What he doesn't know is that the other participants are actors, and he's the only person taking part in the real test, which is actually about group conformity.
Please begin. The experiment you will be taking part in today involves the perception of line length. Your task will be simply to look at the line here on the left and indicate which of the 3 lines on the right is equal to it in length. So, for example, if you
The actors have been told to match the wrong lines. The volunteer will be monitored to see if he gives the correct answer or if he goes along with the opinion of the group and gives the wrong answer. In the first test, the correct answer is 2.
1. 1. 1.
2.
1.
Once again, the correct answer is 2.
3. 3. 3.
3.
3.
The Asch experiment has been repeated many times, and the results have been supported again and again. We will conform to the group. Again, we're very social creatures. We're very much aware of what the people around us think. We want to be liked. We don't want to be seen to rock the boat, so we will go along with the group. Even if we don't believe what people are saying, we'll still go along.
1. 1. 1. 1.
Group dynamics is one of the most powerful forces in human psychology.
1.
It's this native bias towards conformity with the group that the category distortion takes advantage of in Appeal to the People Direct. You create a group dynamic. You get people to start articulating an idea, and this creates pressure amongst other individuals within that group to also assent to that idea, to agree with that point.